Support for This News is So Gay comes from the LGBTQ Opportunity Fund of the Cleveland Foundation, leveraging philanthropy to empower LGBTQ communities. Welcome to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ newsroom. Thanks so much for joining us. The effects of the termination of the crisis hotline option for queer youth are now being seen. Just how bad is it out there for youth seeking this support? Sure, it's September, but that doesn't mean there isn't some Pride news to cover. What are some of the changes we can expect next June? There's some new reporting out there on incarcerated trans individuals. What are the latest headlines there? And of course, where is our roundtable finding queer joy in the news lately? Joining us this week to answer those questions and so many more, LGBTQ beat reporter at the 19th, which is, of course, an independent nonprofit newsroom reporting at the intersection of gender, politics, policy, and power, Kate Sosin. Kate, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm reading unofficial chief chaos officer.
Yes, I'm working on making it official.
Okay, let's get that on the LinkedIn, Kate. Trading director at Investigative Reporters and Editors, a nonprofit dedicated to improving the quality of investigative reporting, Adam Rhodes. Adam, welcome back to the show.
Oh, hello.
So good to have you. And our first ever three-peat panelist breaking yet again new ground for This News is So Gay, digital editor for Indiana Public Broadcasting and the official sports ball correspondent for This News is So Gay, Lauren Chapman. Lauren, I would say welcome back, but honestly, you just live here now and we are happier for it.
Don't call it a comeback. I'm always here. Thank you for having me.
That's our show, everybody. No, there's going to be more. Our Reporters Roundtable is now assembled, so let's dive in. We are now starting to see the effects of the cutting of the LGBTQ specific services for LGBTQ callers to 988, the crisis hotline for queer youth. And those effects are unsurprisingly bad. Kate, you reported on this back in June. Can you catch us up on these cuts? What's the backstory here?
Yeah, so the backstory is 988 was the National LGBTQ Suicide Prevention Hotline. It operated for 3 years, and it saw more than 1.5 million calls and texts. In June, the Trump administration announced that it was going to shut down the hotline. And this was a huge blow because LGBTQ youth are more than 4 times as likely to attempt suicide as their straight cisgender peers. The hotline was ultimately shuttered in mid-July, and that has been a devastating blow because in addition to all of the mental health challenges that youth face, we've seen unprecedented attacks against LGBTQ youth in state legislatures the last 5 years.
It's just one of those stories. I remember when we talked about this a couple months ago when this first came out in the news. It was even my mom who was like, wait, what's the other side of this? There isn't one. There is not another side of this. It's just bad.
It's almost wild we didn't have a hotline before 2022. So it's hard to imagine going back to a time when that wasn't the case.
Some new reporting this week on the effects of those cuts and coming out of Indiana and how perfect that Lauren Chapman from Indiana is here on the show. What are we seeing, Lauren?
Yeah, there's a reason why Ryan Murphy's 2020 musical comedy, The Prom, starts off with note to self, don't be gay in Indiana. And it's not only because he's from Indiana. The data here is rough. So even before eliminating the 988 option, which Indiana does use 988 for mental health and suicide prevention, even before eliminating the LGBTQ option, an annual data set called the Kids Count Data Book found that 23% of LGBTQ youth attempted suicide. That doesn't just count suicidal ideation or anything like that. That is attempts. And that compares to just 9% of their cishet counterparts. There are a lot of programs and organizations in Indiana that are trying to fill that gap, including the Rainbow Youth Project and the slightly better known Indiana Youth Group. But IYG's Zoe O'Haley Burns said across their 5 centers statewide, they are already at or near capacity for providing mental health services. The fact of the matter is, Indiana lawmakers have spent the last several years reaffirming to queer youth that they do not belong in this state. The anti-LGBTQ laws primarily target target kids. So queer youth in Indiana have watched their libraries gut stories about queer people. They've watched their queer teachers forced to stop talking about their families, and they've watched their access to gender-affirming care eliminated, and trans women and girls removed from school and college-based sports teams. These smaller Indiana organizations have a Herculean task to fill the gap that is left behind by these cuts, and I don't see the current administration in Indiana doing much to assist in that task.
Again, that's Lauren Chapman from the Indiana Department of Tourism. Lauren, I'm not going now. I'll tell you that right now. But maybe I'll go to Illinois because, Adam, it looks like some states are taking some action, including right where you're sitting.
Like you just alluded, Illinois is basically stepping in to fill the gap and is establishing a crisis support line for LGBTQ plus folks. And, this is life-saving work. I think as we've all kind of said here, it's feels so common sense that there is no other side of this issue that's you either want queer kids to be able to call somebody when they're in their probably most serious crisis that they'll ever face, or you don't. And so it is nice to see there, being at least beacons of hope. I say nice because, these are things that shouldn't have to happen. These extraordinary measures shouldn't have to happen in the face of what, again, feel like common sense resources being stripped away from queer youth. But Illinois is thankfully stepping in.
Okay, we'll go there. Kate, it looks like some hope that it might be reinstated, or at least some action towards that.
I would say some action toward that.
Okay.
I'm not sure about hope. So Senators Tammy Baldwin and Lisa Murkowski, who obviously sit on both sides of the aisle, introduced a bill just last week to reinstate the hotline 988. Now, I say not necessarily a lot of hope because we know the state of Congress right now, right? So getting that moving and passed, I would say, is a long shot, but it's nice to see movement on that and fighting for the hotline.
Am I missing the plot, by the way? Is there a line somewhere that says this is how much we've saved by not having this option? Or it's really just we don't want to provide this support?
There were numbers crunched on that, and it's so minimal.
Right.
We found with a lot of these cuts that even if they've been presented as cost-saving measures, a lot of times the cost is extremely minimal. It seems that the spirit and intent is to send a message that we do not support LGBTQ plus people in this administration.
That message being sent and received loud and clear. We will certainly keep our eyes on that. Well, it is indeed September, but that doesn't mean that we can't talk about Pride, because Pride is all year round. And we certainly still have some Prides left here in Ohio. There's a couple coming up in the next few weeks. And there were some fascinating Pride stories that caught my attention this week. First, big news out of Tampa. Adam, they're already canceling Pride for 2026. What's going on there?
It definitely doesn't surprise me that this is happening this year. It happened a lot last year, I think. That's when a lot of this really made waves. I think that's when I saw really what felt like kind of precipitously more and more prides were canceling due to lack of funding, due to safety concerns, that kind of thing. And so it doesn't surprise me. I say this as a recovering Floridian. It doesn't surprise me that this is happening in Florida. Thankfully, I lived in South Florida, 15 minutes from Fort Lauderdale. But unfortunately, this is, I think, going to be just another really upsetting byproduct of what we're seeing now, especially with what feels like even more escalating violence. There have been threats against LGBTQ bars in the Southwest that I've seen headlines in Lookout about and things like that. So I think the fears almost ratcheted up from last year. And I think this is, a difficult place for a lot of these organizations to be in because they have to balance the obvious need for spaces like this for queer people to just kind of exist safely and in community, but with the obvious safety concerns that can come with nowadays. So I definitely don't envy the position they're in.
Lauren, on a happier side, there was a great piece about a small town pride that happened against all odds, it looked like, in Indiana, Decatur, Indiana, which I thought was, well, that's not going to be a Lauren Chapman story because that's Shirley, Georgia. Turns out, I don't know if you know this, Lauren, there's a Decatur, Indiana.
Oh, Ken, you have no idea how many things in Indiana are named Decatur. We got a Decatur County. We got a Decatur Township. We got a Decatur City, technically, with 10,000 people. Everything's named Decatur.
And Decatur Pride.
And Decatur Pride. I'm so glad to be able to put my Indiana Department of Tourism hat back on. Decatur is the, don't worry, I still talk about the Ku Klux Klan.
Okay.
So
hopefully not in this story, Lauren.
Now I'm worried.
I surely do.
I need to go lay down.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
recovering Floridian cannot survive Indiana. Breaking news. So Decatur is the largest city in Adams County, which is a rural county in the state's northwest corner. So for context on Adams County, a few years ago, I covered a counter-protest of a Ku Klux Klan rally in Adams County. So this is all the same place. This is all the same area. Indiana is a complicated little stew, and I love it. At the end of July, the city hosted its first ever Pride Festival, welcoming about 1,000 attendees. The city council approved the gathering with a unanimous vote, and Ella Abbott, who is a reporter for WBOI in Fort Wayne, reported that attendees gathered from the surrounding area, including stealing people from God's country, apparently, Van Wert, Ohio. And organizers said the festival will return next year. And, you know, this is one of those stories that really proves something that I love about Indiana, that I love about a lot of these smaller communities. To put my Indiana tourism hat back on, it's that it's a little bit more complicated than that. The most bangin' Pride Festival in the state of Indiana is in Mike Pence's hometown of Columbus. So never forget, location does not necessarily telegraph safety, and it looked like a beautiful time with drag shows and everything else.
And in a transition that I can only imagine so many journalists do every day from Decatur to New York City, Kate, because you are here, we get to talk about a piece that you wrote about the Dyke March in New York City, where they banned Zionists, but it seems like they couldn't agree on what that word meant, Kate. It was an incredible piece, and we all thank you for writing that one.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I struggled with that piece a lot. That's why I did it, because I didn't know how to do it, and I got to the end and I still felt like I didn't know how to do it, and I didn't like any way that I would write it or slice it or complete it, and I just felt endlessly challenged by it, and I felt so much empathy for people, and not in a both sides kind of way, like, but I just felt so much pain for the people that I was reporting on throughout. So I'll tell you what it's about. Basically, New York City Dyke March, which is kind of like the alternative to Pride that is more focused on women, queer, non-binary, trans people, just made a decision to ban Zionists in an effort to like condemn white supremacy and hatred against Palestinians as we watch this war in Gaza. And that act ended up being so loaded and fraught and complicated that it just further kind of drew a wedge in the community and raised really painful conversations about racism and anti-Semitism. And people were like, well, what does it mean to ban Zionists and symbols of Zionism versus banning Jewish symbols? And it was tremendously painful for a lot of the organizers who really wanted to promote values of anti-racism, and it was tremendously painful for organizers who were Jewish, and it just like drew out a lot of nuance in a country where we've for a long time had the privilege of not having to think about a lot of global conflict. And so it just felt like there were so many different identities layered throughout this, and I felt like I could report on this for the rest of my life and not capture everyone or all of the nuance. And so that was worth doing. And I could probably keep doing that story forever.
I love reading a piece and thinking immediately after, as I did after I read that one, I just remember sitting there. I know that I was sitting in my kitchen when I finished it and thought, nope, definitely couldn't have written that one. And so I was just so appreciative that you did. And all the more so now hearing about just your process of working through it.
I got so many people who wrote me to tell me that I failed on that piece. And I was like, that's a good sign. It was like, I'm not done, you know? And not that I failed, but like, it was people from all over.
Yeah.
And I agree with them. And my editor was like, don't write them and tell them that you agree with them. And I was like, but it's true. Like, this is going to go on forever, right?
Right.
And like, I have so much to learn, but like, I'm not going to stop. It's really hard. And that's the point, but we keep talking.
We keep talking and we keep writing. Thank you for that, all three of you. Changing gears, the absolute horror show of issues faced by incarcerated trans individuals continues to get some coverage, although likely not as much coverage as it should. That said, some important news from our panelists here this week. Adam, what is going on with ICE and trans people in custody? You reported on that.
Yeah, so the forever bearer of bad news, I'm sorry. ICE has actually stopped reporting the number of trans people in its custody in biweekly statistical reports. I talked to experts at the Vera Institute for Justice that say these reports, which are required under a 2021 appropriations bill, have disappeared from these statistical reports, basically starting with the first report under the second Trump administration. It is basically a piece of a spreadsheet that is posted online that has since been removed. So now, unfortunately, it really hampers a lot of activist efforts to understand kind of like the scope of the population they seek to serve, where folks might be incarcerated, anything like that. It kind of makes it more of like a fishing expedition for folks to try to capture anyone that like they could possibly work with. And it really just makes the situation a lot more dire. And I think it's really important to underscore that they have to deal with the consequences of transphobia, just, as trans people that exist in the world, trans people in incarcerated settings. So they are unfortunately probably not going to be housed based on their gender identity. And that opens up to its own kind of segment of violence. They deal with probably racist stigma. And then the stigma that it comes with being an immigrant in the U.S. and particularly an immigrant in ICE custody. So really, it is hard to overstate the level of violence that trans people in ICE custody face. But thankfully, there are organizations like the Vera Institute for Justice that are, shining a light on what might seem like small little pieces of the administration chipping away, but actually, have far-reaching consequences.
Such important reporting. And Kate, I was reading your reporting on a lawsuit in Los Angeles, which I feel like is a story we're seeing all over the country, probably with more traction than we would love to see. What's going on there in LA?
In some ways, this is like a story I've written my whole career for like 20 plus years, which is such and such a jail housed a trans woman with men. And that's against the law. But it's significant because it's Los Angeles. So basically, there's a federal law called the Prison Rape Elimination Act, and it says that you have to house trans people on a case-by-case basis, taking into account where they feel like they'll be safest. And we know, wide and large, that jails, detention centers, prisons violate this law. Like by thousands. Overwhelmingly, they violate this law. But Los Angeles is supposed to be a place where they kind of set the standard in terms of placement of trans people, treatment of trans people. And in this case, the woman in question had an ID that said female. She had transitioned years ago. She expressed a desire based on her mental health to be placed with women. So it is significant if Los Angeles is breaking this federal law and placed her in jail with men. So her name is Corretto Simo Love Monk. And she was arrested in 2023 and then housed with men. And then it was a mental health facility. It exacerbated her mental health problem and she attempted to take her own life. So now she's suing LA County for violating her federal rights. So we're going to see what happens with that. And the question really is, if LA can't do it, can anyone, right?
Yeah, we've seen a few of those cases over the past, really even in the past couple weeks, but LA felt a little bit different. Like that might be something a little bit different. All right, we'll see. We'll see. Again, friends, you are listening to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck, from the Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ plus newsroom. Joining me this week, Kate Sosin from the 19th, Adam Rhodes from Investigative, reporters and editors, and Lauren Chapman from Indiana Public Broadcasting. So I try really hard every week to find narrative threads that can connect all these different stories so that I can get a variety of my colleagues' take on a single topic. But I'm totally throwing all of that out because you all worked on some stories that aren't in any way connected that I could see, but I still want to do a roundup of them. Lauren, we're going to start with you. First of all, Lauren Chapman, I will tell you, I have not received any question more frequently from listeners than the question of, has Lauren Chapman found new employment? Would you? And Adam just clapped. People want to know. They're very invested. And I will tell you, people really did write in and thanked you. I should have told you this before now, but thanked you for being so forthright in how your job has been affected by all the cuts to public broadcasting. So first, thank you for that. But second, Lauren Chapman, how goes the job search?
Oh, you're going to break me. Oh, no, I wasn't expecting that. Oh, that's so sweet. It goes. Okay. You know what? It just keeps going. I'm in the final rounds for a couple of different jobs that may or may not pan out.
Okay.
And I'm throwing my hat in the ring on some other kind of reachy jobs that sound like they'd be fun.
Okay. There you go. If I had a co-host position on This News Is So Gay, you would be a finalist. I'll just give it to you. You can have it.
I would be so ready.
Well, getting back to your reporting, you reported on Indiana House Democrats, their pushback on redistricting. And I feel that if anyone can make redistricting an LGBTQ issue, it is Lauren Chapman, to which I say, Lauren Chapman, go.
Can you fundamentally understand who the FI is as a person? Thank you so much. This is a gift. I've never been more perceived in my life. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Lauren Explains Things. This is a new subsection of This News Is So Gay. I'll be your host, Lauren Chapman.
I have completely lost control of my own show, but go for it, as I did last time you all were on. But go ahead.
I was going to say this happened last time, too.
It really did.
Kate was supposed to be a stabilizing influence here, but the master of chaos, not so much.
Oh, no. You just wait.
I was going to say that's the chief chaos officer.
Exactly.
It's going to get way worse.
So for folks who do not know, which I discovered a lot of college journalism students did not, had a blast explaining it to them. Gerrymandering as a function means that the party in power is selecting the people who will be elected, that like you are fixing the game so that the party in power or the people who are drawing the maps have already decided how a specific geographic location is going to vote. The thing is that with that, power protects power. So the people who are going to be selected as candidates aren't going to be trailblazers. For example, Indiana elected its first openly queer lawmaker in 2016, State Senator J.D. Ford, who represents the neighborhoods that I grew up on the west side of Indianapolis. The more polarized districts become, the more deeply entrenched parties will be in putting forward candidates they think are safe bets. And in a place like Indiana, those candidates are going to be cishet and mostly white men. Additionally, because this gerrymandering fight is so focused on U.S. House districts, the anti-LGBTQ legislation we have seen cropping up in state houses across this country are likely going to start cropping up in Congress if this game of political chess tilts in the favor of federal Republicans. What that means for the long-term health of our LGBTQ friends in this fair nation? Who knows? We don't know if that means a federal ban on gender-affirming care for trans youth. We don't know if that means a gender-affirming care ban for all trans people in this country, no matter their age. Does that mean the fall of marriage equality? Who knows? But what we do know is that this is, in many ways, a lot of people have a tendency to think of politics as a rigged game from the jump. And as somebody who's covered state politics in Indiana for 10 years, I can kind of see it, I guess. This is the most egregious version of that. And that is something that we all should be really deeply concerned about, especially as queer people.
And tell me again the name of our new segment. I feel like I should maybe write it down.
Fun Facts with Lauren Chapman. I'll be your host, Lauren Chapman.
Okay, there you go. I love it.
So much fun.
By the way,
fun.
This amuses me because when I first was working on the prep packet, I literally wrote the sentence, Kate, you read a book. And I moved on to another topic. I think I got distracted and I thought it'd be hilarious if I just said, Kate, you read a book and then moved on to Adam. But no, Kate, you read a new book. I assume you read many books, but this new book, Hermaphrodite Logic, A History of Intersex
How
Liberation.
dare you assume that? I have little kids.
And you
read
spoke
anything.
with I know that you read this one because it was very apparent from your writing, because you also spoke with the author. What should we know about this text? And by the way, I'm going to really pull back the curtain here. And it is one of the most painful replies that I often have to people reaching out to the Buckeye Flame when they want us to cover their new book, which I would love to be able to cover all the new books. And I have to tell you how horrendously depressing it is that those pieces get the least amount of engagement of anything that we put out there. And I just want to be like, no, it's a new book. And I got to get more people to care about new books. So Kate, make us care about this book.
You know what? It's funny. I get a lot of book pitches too, right? And like most of them I just never take because I don't have time. But
Yeah.
every now and then I'm like, that is so interesting and I really want to read it. And then I'm like, well, if I'm interested in it, maybe somebody else is. And so, I try to justify doing a piece on it. And this was one of those books. So this is Hermaphrodite Logic, A History of Intersex Liberation by Juliana Gleason. And it is a history of the intersex movement. If you don't know what intersex is, it's, a person who's born with a characteristic that is not strictly male or female, right? And so it challenges our ideas of sex. We have, like, on the right, this idea of a biological male or a biological female, and intersex people throw a wrench into that. And they're like, no, even sex is a spectrum, right? Just like gender, which is really convenient for trans people. We like to talk about intersex people a lot to be like, hey, sex is really complicated too. But intersex people have a whole history and movement of their own. It's really painful, it's really complicated, and it's also really beautiful. And this book gives us that whole history, which is so often talked over, written over, and is really beautiful for all of us to know because it complicates the way we understand all of ourselves, right? In terms of what is sex? How is it assigned? How is it divided up sometimes among kids? And why are we so invested in it? And then also just like, who are these people who have had non-consensual surgeries done to them when they were babies? That are often very painful, very sterilizing, and really traumatic. And they were told that they had cancer when they were, kids. And then what is the history of those people coming together and forming a movement that we have now? We just don't really see or talk about intersex people a lot. And their history and movement is so interesting, and it would really help us understand ourselves as a society a lot better.
I love it. I'm sold. I am sold. And Adam, some incredible reporting from you this week on HIV decriminalization. And I know that we talked about it off the air because I find this, and this is one of those topics that I am admittedly and unabashedly obsessed with. And it's so difficult because you want to tell the story, but there's so much education you have to do every time you put together one of these pieces. And you mastered this one. Some hope you're reporting on?
I'm, really excited to report that even with, everything we're seeing about, the dismantling of basically the public health sphere in the United States, at least from a federal perspective, some states are actually making waves and outright repealing their outdated, unscientific, and frankly racist laws that criminalized the exposure of HIV. The laws date back to the AIDS epidemic. A lot still haven't been updated to comport with, updates in how we understand HIV to be transmitted, the fact that people who are undetectable cannot transmit the virus, updates in access to pre-exposure prophylaxis and, post-exposure prophylaxis. I myself am on PrEP. I just switched to the 6-month injection, which is very exciting, as well as, a lot of these laws are just written exceptionally vaguely to also be applied in cases where HIV can't be transmitted, like spitting and biting. I have reported on these laws for years, and it's usually not kind of in this context. It's usually that just like, wow, this law exists and it's really terrible. But it's exciting that North Dakota and Maryland are the 4th and 5th respectively, states to repeal their laws instead of modernizing them to, still allow like some cases to be prosecuted, as is the case in other states. But yes, really, really exciting that, like, again, both states like now just no longer have HIV criminal legislation on the book. Huge for the people living with HIV in those states, because we know that these laws decrease access to testing and basically operated under the logic that if somebody doesn't know their HIV status, they can't run afoul of the law, or they can't risk that. I was also really excited to be able to spotlight the really powerful, in some cases more than a decade-long coalition building that helped these laws pass, both in North Dakota and in Maryland. I talked to folks who worked on the legislation, and they said, like, there was a lot of conversation with oftentimes unexpected allies that, it was just about, kind of making sense of this very complicated issue that, thank you so much for your kind words, Ken. If you thought I had to do any sort of public education when I wrote this story, like, they were talking to people who didn't know that you couldn't transmit HIV through saliva, like things like that, like just really almost common sense level, or just like what we know is basic level understanding of how HIV is transmitted and things like that. So it's really just a testament to that patience, that hard work by people who saw this as an issue that they wouldn't back down from.
I could do a whole section on here in Ohio, but I'm going to save that for a different day, and Adam and I will write on that one together. But it's just some fascinating HIV decriminalization news here in Ohio, or lack of news, but we'll save that for a different day. It is time, everybody, for Glitter Bomb. This is where our roundtable shares stories of queer joy that they are seeing out there in the world. So let's indeed set off a glitter bomb. Where are you all finding queer joy in the news? Lauren Chapman, let's start with you. Where are you seeing queer joy out there?
Honestly, this week, I'm bringing you queer joy from my own cup. Indianapolis used to be known as the home of minor league sports until we stole the Colts, and that's apparently still a sore subject in Baltimore, which is a weird grudge to hold against Indianapolis for all of our many crimes. But one of the minor league teams in Indianapolis is the Indianapolis Indians, the AAA affiliate of the Pittsburgh Pirates. For listeners who cannot see, my entire back wall is covered in baseball hats because I've seen all 30 MLB ballparks, and I completed my quest late last year.
Amazing.
You know what? There's nothing gayer than a woman who loves baseball.
I was going to say exceptionally on brand.
So the Indianapolis Indians actually were spawned by a long history of Negro League baseball in Indianapolis. And Victory Field gets its name from the old Negro League stadium that was based here. And the Indianapolis Indians had the unfortunate distinction of being one of the only AAA affiliates that had never hosted a Pride Night. Until last year, where they hosted their first Pride Night. Now, June comes and goes, no Pride Night. I'm under the assumption we're not getting one. That's fine. I got my rainbow hat. I'm pretty happy. Until I discover the week of my birthday is their second annual Pride Night. And so my friends did the distinct honor of carting me to the ball game and having a wonderful night at Pride Night with a Thirsty Thursday dollar beer night as well. So thank you so much to the Indianapolis baseball team and to my ridiculous group of friends who said, hey, let's get this lesbian to the ballpark.
That's, by the way, a whole new podcast title, but that is amazing. And happy belated birthday.
They knew it was your birthday and they moved it.
They said, you know what? End of August, we need to get those neurotic August Virgos to the ballpark.
Kate Sosin, where are you seeing queer joy in the news?
So I actually found it in a story that I reported last week. So I was doing a story on this fate of Obergefell recently, which is like, will we all be married or not? And I was surprised to find that a lot of the experts were like, yes, we'll be fine. And a lot of people disagreed with that. And they were like, that's what they said about Roe. And we're not going to be married. So people had feelings, fine. But one of the backups, of course, is the Respect for Marriage Act, which was passed during Biden's time in office. And the Respect for Marriage Act guarantees that, like, you can get married in states where they still have marriage laws on the books and that you'll stay married. And I was asking a lawyer, like, okay, but what if the Supreme Court wants to overturn that? And he was like, they can't. There's a poison pill in it. And I was like, what's the poison pill? Like, what does that mean? He goes, it means that there's something in that if they overturned that law, they would be greenlighting something that they really don't want to do. And it's very funny. And I was like, what is it? Polygamy. So apparently...
I'm obsessed.
Oh my God, work!
Didn't see that word coming up.
when they wrote the Respect for Marriage Act, they outlawed polygamy. It's the only federal law that outlaws polygamy. So if they strike down the Respect for Marriage Act, they will be greenlighting polygamy.
That made me so
And that
happy.
is so smart and hilarious to me. So they have to
Amazing.
keep this on the books.
That's perfect. That is the best thing I've heard.
Can I just also say, from a journalism perspective, this was also because we reran that piece in the Buckeye Flame. And I have to tell everybody what the name of the piece is. It's called Take a Deep Breath. Marriage Equality is Probably Here to Stay. I don't think we've ever had a piece where more people had reactions without reading it. My gosh, did they just respond to the headline? And exactly what you said, Kate, and I know I talked to some folks at the 19th, so I knew you all were experiencing the same thing of just folks saying, that's exactly what they said about Roe. That's actually not exactly what they said about Roe. There weren't a lot of people out there saying, oh, yeah, no, reproductive freedoms are totally here to stay.
I never thought Roe was going to be okay. Like, I remember... like very early in my career talking to someone from the right who was like, we're gonna get Roe.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
being like, you are?
I had
And he
to
was like,
just
"Yeah."
keep reminding myself, don't respond to the comments, don't respond to the comments. I was slightly successful.
Not to be a copy editor on Maine, putting a little M dash because of polygamy, you cut out half of those comments.
And then you get polygamy in the headline.
And then you get polygamy in the headline. And then you end up in some weird SEO results.
But here's the thing, and this I also found funny. The lawyer pointed out to me, he said, a lot of queer people were also kind of upset about that because there are a lot of polyamorous queer people.
I was going to say, and it was like, the amount of homosexuals that I know that would absolutely marry like
Yeah.
a polycule if they could.
Yeah, words I didn't think were coming up today. And yet we are still on the Queer Joy segment. So Adam Rhodes, where are you seeing a story of queer joy in the news?
I am also seeing queer joy in myself, but I am seeing it in the fact that the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City are back on my
Yes.
television, and I get to watch these like ridiculous women fight about the dumbest things. And I just loved having to see Mary Cosby walk through a campground. It like nothing is ever gonna make me that happy ever again.
Is Mary Cosby the best person on TV?
She is.
I just like perfect. The season that she was off was the worst season.
I will say this. I'm not a big drinker. If I wanted to just be annihilated, I would invent a drinking game every time Brittany says I have an announcement.
And
It
I
has become
can't.
the most amazing. Folks, if you don't know what we are talking about here, I question all of your choices. So just want to put that out there.
I was talking with my friends about it. Like, even the producers hate Britney now.
Yes.
Like, you can just tell, like, that there are so many, like, awkward pauses and just, like, silent, like, judging looks that, like, they leave in that I'm just like, oh, it's because they hate her.
And don't get me wrong, I wanted to be an Osmond too growing up, but yeah, it's painful. It's painful.
So funny. But yeah, like, frankly, especially with, like, everything going on in the world, everything that I kind of turn my attention to as a journalist, I love to just watch, like, mindless nonsense when I get off work. And the fact that the Real Housewives are back on my television, that I have, like, new instances of these rich women yelling at each other over things. I can't wait till we get to the powdered wig episode, because that's all I'm seeing in the previews, and I just, like, need it. I'm, like, Heather screaming in a powdered wig I'm so ready.
Well, I certainly want to hear what you all are working on, and our listeners want to hear about that as well. Kate Sosin, what's coming up for you?
I can't tell you.
Okay,
It's a secret.
that was a quick one. Any, like, sense of a topic?
Well, I hope again to do another ghost story for Halloween, but I haven't found it yet.
Okay,
I actually have a story for you for Halloween that you would actually love.
Great.
teamwork.
Ask Adam what I'm working on.
Okay. Adam Rhodes, can you please let us know what you and Kate are working on, either separately or together? Thank you.
I also kind of got to keep it a little close to the chest. Working on a couple different things that I'm excited about. One of which, I think, as we alluded to kind of before the recording started, what I'm colloquially calling the Leather Daddy Slap Fight of Chicago. So get ready for that.
I am ready. Lauren Chapman, what you working on?
Wiping up the floors, sweeping up the tables, something along those lines. Trying to figure out if I'm going to end up in a new job before Indiana pulls the trigger on redistricting, and basking in the glory of my silly little Oregon Trail game winning a national Murrow for innovation in journalism. So I won literally the week that we recorded the last episode. So you can find it at ipbs.org/civically-Indiana. And gonna go to New York to go to the Murrow Awards.
Amazing.
Oh, yeah,
Amazing.
congrats.
We are
Thank
excited for
you.
the pictures from that, and we will link to the game as well. Well, that is all the time that we have for this week. I want to thank our roundtable. Kate Sosin from the 19th. Thanks so much for being here, Kate.
Thank you for having me.
Adam Rhodes, a pleasure as always.
Always a pleasure to be here.
And Lauren Chapman, on behalf of the, state right over to, what are we, the right of you? I don't know where we are anymore, Lauren.
East.
East, let's go with that. Lauren, always a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me back so many times.
Again, I'm Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame. And if you liked this episode of This News is So Gay, please share it with a friend, rate and review it on your favorite podcasting app, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on our next episode. And heck, you can, of course, even reach out to us. Send an email on over to editor@thebuckeyeflame.com and let us know your thoughts on anything that we talked about, anything having to do with polygamy. In the meantime, read LGBTQ plus news, share the stories of LGBTQ plus reporters, and support the work of LGBTQ plus newsrooms. Until next week, friends.